So I teased the heck out of you guys with this little unknown mystery device that I picked up at the Nearfest ham festival we had here in New England at the end of April, the beginning of May. We have a spring and we have a fall session here in New England called Nearfest. It's a great ham fest. It's known for boat anchors and strange things brought out of the ham shack and from under the workbench, and people bring their trucks and they try to unload a lot of this interesting equipment. I call it interesting equipment. So there are several hints on what this thing might be. The first one is this strange writing here on the front, 1W1233. That should be a hint to some of you. Another hint is this transformer, which clearly says modulation and output auto transformer. Auto transformer, what's that mean? What's an auto transformer? Really interesting. Of course, we have an SO239. That means that this is some type of radio device, probably a ham device of some kind. What else do we have? We have a tube socket on the back, which probably is where you bring power in. Let's look at the front. Interestingly enough, there are other hints here on the front. See the R and the T and the L and the T? Notice that the writing is upside down. Why would the writing be upside down? Can anyone think of a radio that you deliberately mount upside down? Okay, think about that for a minute. There is a connector here which appears to be a microphone connector. So this is probably a transmitter at least. And there's a control called tune. Interesting, huh? What else can we learn? Well, there is a tube complement. We have a 12AX7 and a 6AQ5. Both of those are known to be audio type tubes. This is a nice little audio amplifier. And then we have a couple other tubes. We have a 6AU8. That's a multiple tube. It's a triode and a pentode. And we have a 6AN8, which is also a triode and a pentode. Finally, we have a crystal. Okay, and if you zoom in on that crystal, that should be the final hint as to what this thing really is. So, have you guys figured out what this thing is yet? With all of those hints, have you figured out what this device possibly could be? So what is this strange device that I picked up at Nearfest? What do you think this thing is? It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 tubes, some kind of a transformer on top. Looks like there's a crystal, some controls on the front, and what appears to be a mic connector. And then on the back, we've got some obvious places to put the antenna, possibly some kind of gain control here, a jack of some kind, and maybe this is a place to put in power. What do you think this thing could be? And can we figure it out just by going through it a little at a time? Plenty of hints on this, plenty of hints on what this device is if you just look very carefully.
So first let's look at the tube lineup. I think we all know that when you see a 12AX7 and a 6AQ5 close together, this represents an audio amplifier chain. This could be the audio for a receiver or possibly a modulator for an AM transmitter. The 6AN8 tube is a small dual tube with a medium mu triode and a sharp cutoff pentode. This tube is seen in audio preamplifiers, RF preamplifiers, modulator front ends, super heterodyne and regenerative receivers, and it's useful well into the VHF frequencies. Looking down into the underside of the chassis, I can see that the 6AN8 has tune circuits that could be 6 or 10 meters. And with that tuning capacitor and the gimmick coupling cap, my guess is that this is a simple super regen or super regenerative receiver with a preamp stage. The triode is likely the detector, and the pentode is likely the RF amplifier. The 6AU8 is a taller, also a pentode and triode combination, and it has a pretty impressive plate dissipation both on the pentode and the triode section. This tube would make a fairly good crystal-controlled transmitter section for about 3 to 4 watts out. These tubes seem to be ringing a bell for me. I had a Heathkit tour as a young ham, and this lineup seemed familiar. Could this be a homemade version of a Heathkit Sixer, or one of the other lunchboxes? Here's the tube lineup in the Heathkit Sixer. Looks pretty familiar. That's the exact tube lineup, but that still did not explain the strange markings on the front. Let's take a closer look at the crystal. Ah, bingo, 27.055 megahertz. Hey, that's CB channel 8. Did Heathkit make a CB? This is what we're talking about, guys. The Heath CB1, which was an 11 meters lunchbox, is what this thing's patterned after. So now I know that this is a Heathkit CB1 clone that some clever technician built likely around 1959, 1960. Let's go through the schematic before everybody gets bored. And even though you can't legally reproduce this for the CB band, you sure could build it for 12 meters, 10 meters, or even 6 meters without many changes. Actually, change is limited to changing the crystal and the tune circuits a little bit. Let's start on the audio amplifier circuit. You can see there's a microphone speech amplifier and a two-stage audio section, which doubles as your speaker driver amp and the modulator. Really, the whole key to this radio is that T2 transformer. That transformer allows us to do double duty as an audio output to the speaker and as center tap Heising modulator for the final amplifier. This was a triad transformer that Heath probably bought in the thousands, but you could substitute any push-pull 6V6, 6AQ5 style audio amplifier output transformer and connect it in this way, and I think it would work fine. So this might already be in your junk box. T1, the power transformer, is a fairly common 117 volt, 6.3 volt power transformer that utilizes a voltage doubler and some dropping resistors to give all the required voltages. This set could also be powered from the vehicle as it's a 12 volt system, and Heathkit applied a vibrator power supply that serviced, I think, all of the Lunchbox series and many other radios at that time. The set could be wired for 6.3 car battery operation as well, and they had a 6 volt vibrator pack for that purpose. Okay, let's go over to the RF side of the schematic, and we can see that the 6AN8 pentode is being used as a RF amplifier or preamplifier. The purpose of this is not only to provide a few dB of gain, but more importantly to isolate the super regenerative section from causing on-channel interference right out the radio's antenna. This stage was required to pass the FCC Part 15 emissions for receivers, by the way. The super regenerator is of the self-quenching type, and there is an adjustment for best demodulation. The receiver would be expected to be quite sensitive, rivaling many of the super heterodyne receivers of that era. Although it would be totally useless on the modern CB band, as this type of receiver favors the strongest adjacent channel signal many times at the expense of the channel you're actually interested in. On the 6AU8 transmitter end, this double tube approach with the on-channel overtone crystal is standard fare for many CBs of this 1950s, early 60s era. After all, you're only permitted a 4-watt carrier with CB. Would it meet today's emissions standards? Maybe, maybe not. But at the time, the standard was only minus 43 dBc, or dB below carrier, instead of 60 dB below carrier. Now, if we put it into a tuned antenna fed with coax, I now believe it would be legal from all FCC scrutiny from a close-by monitor, which is how they actually measure it, over the air. This transmitter is simple. It uses an Armstrong feedback crystal oscillator driving a Class C pentode final amplifier at the 5-watt input level. TR switching on this set is manual. It's a single rotary switch. There's no relays needed in this transceiver. And look at the crazy call letters on the front of this box. The letters assigned to the USA are W, A, N, and K. Those strange call signs are the early CB call letters assigned by the FCC. The FCC issued licenses starting with 1W to 20W in the late 50s through the early 60s. The K calls we're all more familiar with came later. The CB radio service was established by law in the U.S. in 1949, and there was a Class A and a Class B service, both in the UHF band. So Motorola and GE and companies like that were very happy, and CB did exist, but it was strictly UHF, and at the time, poor range, pricey equipment. So the FCC thought of using 11 meters, and that would give people a casual radio service, decent range, inexpensive gear, and the rules did call for communication no further than 150 miles, and at the sunspot minimum this seemed to work out. But when the solar cycle started peaking, especially in the late 50s, early 60s, it was really hot. The CB ops realized they could work across country on just 5 watts input power. Of course, the hams knew this all along, but the 11 meter band was originally a ham band. It was reallocated to CB in 1957, and there was also a Class C remote control, and this Class D service in the 27 megahertz band is what we know as CB. On September 11th, 1958, the CB service Class D was created on 27 megahertz, and this band became what is commonly known today as the CB band. And the FCC does not renew the formally issued CB radio service licenses. But the FCC service rules for the CB band, which are in 47 CFR Part 95 Subpart D, FCC rules for CBs remain very strict. The radios must be type certificated, and the emission requirements actually exceed that required for ham radios. So technically this transmitter that I have in my hands is illegal to use on the air, although at the time it may have been permissible for someone holding a second or first class radio telephone license to build and service such a device. How Heathkit produced a legal kit for the CB band must have been very clever testing and FCC lobbying. In the 1960s, the CB radio service was quite popular, being used by small businesses like carpenters, plumbers, electricians, and even taxis like in my hometown. It's still perfectly legal to use CB in a business manner, but most of the activity is casual, individual CB use. So again, can I use this radio on the air on Channel 8 legally? Technically, no, I cannot. But I could recrystal it and retune it for 10 or 12 meters and use it on the ham band. Hey, by the way, you guys keep missing clues on this radio. Oh, and before we end this thing, what about the upside down radio, the upside down writing? Well, you guys know how to mount a CB in a truck, don't you?
So now that we know that this is a CB, a homemade CB transceiver, okay, you haven't seen too many of those before, and that it actually was probably mounted in a vehicle upside down, which is even stranger. It's basically a Heathkit 10 meter or 11 meter transceiver. It has a super regenerative receiver, and it has a simple 2-stage crystal transmitter. The audio using that auto transformer hookup can be used as the modulator or it can be used as the receiver's audio output with plenty of gain. So think of this as a Heathkit 2er, 6er, or 10er on a little chassis, and with an external power supply. And now you know what we're looking at here. Hope you enjoyed this little mystery transmitter video. Do you think this is worth firing up and bringing back? Do you really think I should work on this thing and make it work and make a CB contact with it? Do you think that would be challenging? Anyway, let me know in the comments. Let's see if this thing can actually put something out on the CB band.